The fire had already eaten through the roof when Jack Morrison noticed a shadow moving along the dirt. At first, he thought it was some animal dragging itself away from the inferno. But as he rode closer, squinting through the smoke, a chill ran down his spine. It wasn't an animal. It was a girl, no more than 15, dragging her torn body across the ground. Her face was covered in soot, her skin blackened and raw from the heat. Without hesitation, Jack leapt from his horse and dashed toward her. The heat hit him hard, almost knocking the breath from his lungs, but he pushed forward. The girl was coughing violently, her small hands clawing at the earth as she tried to escape the flames. When she saw him approaching, her eyes went wide with fear. "Stay away from me," she screamed, her voice ragged and broken. "Please, just leave me alone." Jack knelt down slowly, making sure not to startle her. "It's okay, miss. I'm here to help. You're safe now." The girl's body was trembling uncontrollably, and blood trickled down her forehead. Her left arm was bent unnaturally, a clear sign of injury. Her eyes darted nervously back at the burning house, as if waiting for something more horrifying to emerge. "We need to get you away from here," Jack said gently, reaching out. "That fire's spreading fast." "No," she whimpered, scrambling backward, her panic palpable. "You don't understand. He'll come back. He always does." A cold knot formed in Jack's stomach. He knew there was more to this than just a house fire. Her voice, filled with such terror, told a story far darker than a mere blaze. "Who's going to come back, miss?" The girl's lips trembled as she whispered, "My father, he did this. He poured the kerosene and lit the match while I was sleeping." Her voice cracked, tears mixing with the soot on her face. "Because I wouldn't marry the man he chose. Because I'm a disgrace to the family name. He says I'm worthless." Jack's heart clenched. He'd seen cruelty in his years on the frontier. But this was a new level. A man willing to burn his own daughter alive. The rage building inside him was almost too much to bear, but he held it back, focusing on the girl in front of him. "None of that is true, miss," he said, removing his jacket and draping it over her shoulders. "You're not alone anymore." For a moment, she hesitated, then wrapped the jacket tightly around her. Her eyes, haunted with pain, met his. He said he'd finish it. If the fire didn't kill me, he would. Jack's jaw tightened as he looked at her, trying to process the gravity of what she had just said. He knew something had to be done. "And what's your name, miss?" he asked. Sarah Coleman." She glanced over her shoulder, her fear growing. "Mr. Morrison, you need to leave. He'll know I'm still alive. When he finds out, he'll come back for me." Jack's eyes scanned the horizon. He could hear the distant sound of horses' hooves. At least 2, maybe 3. His fingers twitched toward his gun. "He's coming, isn't he?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "He'll come back to make sure I'm dead." Jack helped Sarah to her feet, supporting her injured arm. "Can you ride?" She nodded, her face pale with pain. "I can try. With this arm. I'm not sure how well." "Good," Jack said, guiding her toward his horse. "I'm going to put you on my horse, and you're going to ride toward town. Tell Sheriff Watson what happened here." "What about you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jack checked his revolver, making sure it was loaded. "I'm going to have a word with your father." "No." Sarah's good hand grabbed his arm desperately. "You don't understand. He's not just cruel, he's insane. Last year, he nearly killed a ranch hand for looking at me wrong. He'll kill you without a second thought." "I don't care," Jack replied, his voice low and calm. "I can't let him finish what he started." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "Please, Mr. Morrison, take me away. We can go together. You don't owe me anything." Jack looked at the broken girl in front of him, her plea echoing a past failure he could never undo. It reminded him of someone he used to know, someone he hadn't been able to protect. "I'm not running, Sarah. And neither are you. Not anymore." The sound of horses' hooves grew louder, and Jack's eyes hardened. He could make out 4 riders now. They were close, and they were coming fast. Sarah looked at him, eyes wide with understanding. "He'll never stop, will he? Even if I run to the ends of the earth, he'll keep coming." Not if I have anything to say about it, Jack said grimly, as he helped Sarah onto his horse. They both heard something that froze their blood. A voice carrying over the prairie. Spread out, the voice barked, "If that little which is still breathing, I want her found. Do you hear me?" Sarah's face went pale as her grip on the saddle horn tightened. "That's him," she whispered. Jack's hand moved to his gun instinctively. Through the smoke and heat, he could make out 4 riders, moving with the precision of hunters closing in on wounded prey. "Sarah," Jack said, his voice low, "I need to know something. Has he done this before?" She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "Not with fire, but other ways. 2 years ago, he pushed me off the barn roof. Told everyone I fell. Last winter, he locked me outside during a blizzard for an entire night. Said if I froze, it would teach me obedience." Jack's stomach turned. This was no accident. This was years of systematic abuse, each act more brutal than the last. "Why night? What changed?" "I told him I wouldn't marry the man he chose," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to be his property anymore." The riders were almost on him now, their voices clearer, angrier. Jack clenched his jaw and turned to face the approaching threat. "Stay close, Sarah. Stay behind me. This ends tonight." As the riders closed in, Jack knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let this man take his daughter or anyone ever again. Sarah's voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "I couldn't marry Edgar Whitman. He's 63, and he's already buried 2 wives. His ranch borders ours, and my father wants a land. When I refused, he said I was defying God's will, defying the family's honor. So he decided to kill me. A dead daughter will be less a shame than one who disobeys," he said. "At least a dead daughter couldn't bring more disgrace to the Coleman name." The riders were close now, their shapes becoming clearer through the dust. Sarah's father was in front, tall and lean, with cold, gray eyes that held no warmth. Jack could see the unmistakable family resemblance between him and Sarah. The other 3 men, no doubt hired guns, had the hard faces and stances of men who'd kill without a second thought. "Mr. Morrison," Sarah said, urgency in her voice. "Those men with him, they're not from around here. Father's been hiring drifters and outlaws for months. He says it's for protection, but I think he's been planning this for a long time." Jack scanned the group carefully, noting the way the hired guns kept their hands close to their guns, ready for anything. These weren't just ranch hands or neighbors. They were mercenaries. "How many people know what really happened here tonight?" Jack asked, keeping his voice low. "Nobody," Sarah whispered. "Father sent all the regular hands away yesterday. Said they needed time off. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, and with this wind, they probably think it's just a controlled burn." Jack's stomach sank. It was all planned, no witnesses, no help coming, and hired killers to ensure the job was done right. His mind raced, and he looked at Sarah. "There's something else you need to tell me. What's your father's name?" "Thomas Coleman," Sarah said quietly, "but most people call him Colonel Coleman. He was in the war." Jack's blood went cold. The name rang a bell. He'd heard it whispered in bars, around campfires. Colonel Thomas Coleman wasn't just any rancher. He was a man known for solving his problems with violence and ensuring that no loose ends were ever left untied. And right now, Sarah was the biggest loose end of his life. The colonel reined in his horse about 50 yards away, close enough for Jack to see the calculating look in his eyes. The 3 hired guns spread out in a semicircle, effectively blocking any escape route. It was clear that this was a man who treated even the murder of his own daughter like a military operation. Sarah's voice rang out, cutting through the tension. "I see you found yourself a champion. How touching." Jack stepped forward, keeping Sarah behind him. "Colonel Coleman, I presume? Looks like you've got some explaining to do about this fire." Coleman laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Explain to you? I don't believe we've been introduced. Stranger. But then again, introductions won't be necessary, since you'll be dead in a few minutes." "The name's Jack Morrison," he said, his voice steady, "and I'm not going anywhere until I know this girl is safe." Coleman's eyes narrowed. "Safe? That girl is my property, Morrison. My blood, my responsibility. and my burden to deal with. You've no business interfering in family matters. Behind Jack, Sarah's voice broke, barely audible. Property? Is that all I've ever been to you? Coleman spat on the ground. You've been nothing but trouble since the day you were born. Your mother died bringing you into this world, and you've been a curse on this family ever since. Tonight, I'll finally do what I should have done 15 years ago. Jack's stomach turned. The casual cruelty in Coleman's words sent a cold shiver through him. The man wasn't just evil. He was a monster. You're talking about killing a 15-year-old girl because she won't marry some old man, Jack said, his voice rising. I'm talking about preserving family honor, Coleman sneered. Something a drifter like you wouldn't understand. The Coleman name means something in this territory. I won't let it be dragged to the mud by a disobedient daughter who thinks she can make her own choices. One of the hired guns, a scarred man with cold eyes, leaned forward in his saddle. Colonel, are we doing this or not? The sun's getting low, and I want to be paid and gone before anyone comes looking. Coleman raised his hand. Patience, Burke. I want to make something clear to Mr. Morrison before we proceed. Sarah, tell him what happened to the last man who tried to help you. Sarah's voice cracked. Father, please, don't tell him about Deputy Miller. Jack turned slowly to Sarah, his heart pounding. What about Deputy Miller? She hesitated before answering. He came to the ranch last month after I showed up at church with a black eye. He asked too many questions about how I got hurt. Her voice trembled. They found him in the river 3 days later. Father said he must have fallen off his horse while drunk. But you know better. Coleman finished the thought. Just like Mr. Morrison here is about to learn, that some lessons only get taught once. Jack's mind raced. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. Coleman had already killed one man to keep his secrets, and was clearly ready to kill again. The hired guns weren't just hired hands. They were killers. Faster than Jack, most likely. But running meant leaving Sarah to die. And standing meant facing impossible odds. Here's what's going to happen, Morrison, Coleman said, his voice smooth and cold. You're going to walk away right now. Get on your horse and forget you ever saw any of this. In exchange, I'll make your death quick instead of slow. But if I refuse... Coleman's smile was as cold as ice. I'll let Burke and his friends have some fun with you before they put you down. But either way, you're not leaving here alive. You've seen too much and you know too much. Jack's mind cleared. Coleman's plan was unfolding exactly as he expected. Kill Sarah, kill the witnesses, and make it all disappear. The man wasn't just insane. He was methodical. But as Jack prepared to make his move, Coleman said something that stopped his blood cold. Oh, and Morrison, Coleman said, Sarah failed to mention that Burke here is the fastest gun in 3 territories. He's killed 17 men in fair fights, and twice that many in unfair ones. Burke's hand hovered near his gun, his dead eyes locked on Jack, waiting. The reputation was real. Burke was fast, too fast. Jack knew the odds weren't just bad. They were impossible. But as he looked at Sarah's terrified face, Jack realized something that changed everything. He wasn't fighting for himself anymore. You know what, Colonel? Jack said, his voice steady despite the storm of adrenaline inside him. I've got a counterproposal. Coleman raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Let the girl go, Jack said, his eyes hard. Let her ride away, and I'll stay here and face Burke in a fair fight. Winner takes all. Sarah grabbed Jack's arm, her voice frantic. No, you can't do this. You don't understand what kind of man Burke is. But Jack was watching Burke closely, studying the gunfighter's stance. The man was good, but there was something in his eyes, arrogance. Burke didn't think Jack was a threat. He didn't take him seriously. Coleman laughed. That's almost noble, Morrison. But you're missing the point. This isn't about fairness or honor. This is about eliminating problems. Sarah dies tonight, regardless of what happens to you. Then why not make it interesting? Jack pressed. If I win, Sarah goes free. If Burke wins, you get what you want anyway. What do you have to lose? Nothing, Coleman admitted with a cold grin. Because Burke doesn't lose. Jack could feel Sarah trembling behind him. She was trying to warn him, pressing on his arm. Short squeeze, long squeeze. But Jack couldn't figure it out. "All right, Morrison," Coleman said. "I'll indulge his foolishness. Burke, show this cowboy why they call you the fastest gun in 3 territories." Burke dismounted slowly, fluidly, as though the act was second nature. Jack's stomach sank. The man wasn't just fast. He was ambidextrous, guns on both hips, and both hands moving with equal precision. "You ever killed a man before, Cowboy?" Burke asked, his voice gravelly. "A few," Jack replied, eyes narrowing. "But you're about to join them." Jack positioned himself for the draw, his mind running through every gunfight technique he had learned in his years on the frontier. But just as he was about to make his move, Sarah stepped out from behind him. "Wait," she called. "Before you kill each other, there's something you all need to know." Coleman's face darkened. "Sarah, get back behind Morrison. Right now." "I won't run anymore, Father." Sarah's voice rang out, firm and full of defiance despite the pain. "I'm tired of being afraid, tired of hiding, and tired of watching good people die because of your madness." She turned, facing Burke directly, her words gaining strength with every syllable. "Mr. Burke, my father hasn't told you the whole truth about why you're here." Burke's hand paused, hovering over his gun. "What are you talking about, girl?" "Tell him about the gold, Father," Sarah continued, her voice cutting through the tension. "Tell him about the real reason you want me dead." Coleman's face turned pale with rage, but there was something else in his eyes now. Fear. "Sarah, you don't know what you're doing," he warned, his voice thick with anger. "I know exactly what I'm doing," Sarah replied, her tone steady. "For the first time in my life, I'm telling the truth." And with that, she dropped a revelation that would turn everything upside down. "Before my mother died," she began, her voice steady and growing stronger, "she told me where she hid the gold from Father's war crimes. $20,000 in gold coins, stolen from Union supply wagons during the war." Burke's hand froze completely. $20,000 was a fortune, more than most men saw in their entire lives. Coleman's face shifted from pale to purple with fury. "Sarah, you little fool," Coleman hissed. "You have no idea what you've just done." But Sarah wasn't done. She hid it because she knew exactly what kind of man my father is. A murderer and a thief who used the war to get rich. The gold's buried under the old oak tree, behind our house, the one that burned down tonight. Jack watched as Burke's gaze shifted from him to Coleman. In that instant, Jack saw the glint of greed in Burke's eyes. $20,000, you say?" Burke drawled, his voice slow, calculating. "And where exactly did you say this gold was buried?" Coleman's face went cold, his voice turning deadly quiet. "Burke, remember who's paying you." Burke didn't miss a beat. "You're paying me $50 to kill a girl and a cowboy," he said. "But she's talking about $20,000 in gold. My math says that a much better deal." The other 2 hired guns exchanged looks, clearly thinking the same thing. Jack realized in that moment that Sarah had just turned Coleman's own men against him with one simple truth. But the situation wasn't over yet. "The problem is," Sarah continued, her voice still clear, "Father's the only one who knows the exact spot." She glanced at Jack. "Mother gave me the general location, but she died before she could tell me where exactly. So you need him alive if you want that gold," Burke said with a wicked smile as he continued to aim his gun at Jack. Coleman's hand twitched toward his gun. "You think you're clever, girl? All you've done is sign your death warrant, and Morrison's too. Now I'll have to kill both of you to keep that gold a secret." But before he could act, Burke moved with the speed of a striking snake. In a flash, he drew his gun, not at Jack, but at Coleman. "I don't think so, Colonel," Burke said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "See, I've got a new plan. We keep you alive long enough to dig up that gold. Then we split it 4 ways. He paused. 4 ways. You two, the girl, and the cowboy, Coleman and Morrison don't make out of here. The air thickened with tension, and Jack realized just how dangerous Burke had become. He wasn't just going to kill Jack. He was now in it for the gold. And Burke had enough of a plan to make everyone a target. Jack stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. "There's just one problem with your plan, Burke." "What's that?" Burke smirked. "You're still planning to kill an innocent girl." And I can't let that happen. Burke's laugh echoed in the stillness, cold as the winter wind. You're going to stop me, cowboy, even with the colonel's gun aimed at your back. Jack's blood ran cold as he felt the unmistakable pressure of a weapon pressing against his spine. Coleman had used a distraction to draw his own gun and was now pointing it directly at Jack. He was trapped, outnumbered, outgunned, and with nowhere to turn. Here's what's going to happen, Burke said, his voice mocking. You're going to drop your gun right now. If you don't, the colonel's going to put a bullet in your back. Then we're all going to take a little ride and dig up that gold. Jack's mind raced. He was cornered, but something inside him refused to surrender. As he started to lower his gun, Sarah did something no one saw coming. She grabbed the reins of Jack's horse and, with a swift, determined movement, vaulted into the saddle despite her injuries. If you want that gold, she shouted, you'll have to catch me first. Without waiting for a response, she spurred the horse into a full gallop, charging straight toward the burning house. In that instant, every gun shifted its focus, from Jack to Sarah. Burke, Coleman, and the other two gunmen scrambled to mount their horses, cursing and shouting as they gave chase, their attention now fully on the girl. Jack, though, had been prepared for this moment. The second their eyes were off him, he drew his revolver and fired. The bullet struck Burke in the shoulder, spinning the legendary gunfighter off his horse and onto the dirt. Burke had been fast, but he'd made the mistake of underestimating a man who had nothing left to lose. Damn you, fool! Coleman roared, wheeling his horse around. She'll die in those flames, and the gold location dies with her. Maybe, Jack replied coolly, keeping his gun trained on Coleman. But at least she'll die free, not murdered by her own father. The two other hired guns hesitated, clearly torn between their fear of Coleman and their greed for the gold. Jack didn't give them time to decide. He fired two quick shots, both hitting the men in the shoulders, sending them tumbling from their saddles. But Sarah hadn't ridden into the flames to die. She'd circled around the back of the burning house, where the fire hadn't spread as much. She appeared from the smoke, still in the saddle, but barely conscious from the heat and smoke. Coleman saw her first and spurred his horse toward her, raising his gun. If I can't have that gold, no one will. Starting with you. Jack had one shot left in his revolver. Coleman was still too far for a clean shot, but Jack knew sometimes you had to take the chance and trust that fate would guide your hand. He pulled the trigger, and the bullet found its mark. It struck Coleman in the chest, knocking him backward off his horse and onto the dirt. The man who had terrorized his own daughter for so long was finally finished. Jack rode quickly to Sarah, who was slumped forward, struggling to stay conscious. Her face was pale, covered in soot and smoke, but she was alive. The gold, she whispered, barely able to speak. It's real. Mother really did hide it. Jack helped her down from the horse, his voice soft. What do you want to do about it? Sarah looked back at the burning house, then at the body of her father lying in the dirt. I want to give it to the church in town. Mother always said stolen money brought nothing but suffering. Maybe it can do some good for once. Jack smiled, his heart swelling with pride. After everything Sarah had been through, her first thought was about helping others. That told him everything he needed to know about who she was. As they rode toward town, Sarah asked quietly, Mr. Morrison, what happens to me now? I don't have any family left. I don't have anywhere to go. Jack had been thinking about that same question. His ranch was small, but it was honest work, a peaceful life. Maybe it was time to have some company, some family again. Well, Sarah, Jack said, I've got a ranch that could use some help, and I could use some company. If you're interested in hard work and a fresh start, you're welcome to stay as long as you want. For the first time since he'd found her, Sarah smiled, a small, fragile smile, but it was real. And sometimes that's how healing begins, with one person willing to offer safety, and another with the courage to accept it. The Coleman ranch burned to ground that night, taking with it 15 years of fear and suffering. But from the ashes, two people found something worth saving. Each other.